these memories pull us under.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I know your time and your attention are some of the most valuable assets that you have. And so it's such a privilege and an honor for me. And I'm immensely grateful that you guys came out this morning to learn to invest in working in your business and on your business, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to start off this morning with a little bit of strategy. We're going to talk about how you can accelerate your business growth. Now, what I'm going to teach, it's highly intuitive. There's not a whole lot that I'm going to say this morning, honestly, that you'll say, hey, I never thought about that before. You'll actually recognize most of it immediately. But I can almost guarantee that you've not stopped to process it to a point where you can put a name to it. And a big part of what I'm going to do this morning is give you language to help you understand the pattern that every business goes through. Now, the problem that we have is even though we know a lot of this stuff, even though we get it intuitively, we don't do it. And how do I know that we don't do it? Well, the first thing I know is less than 20% of new businesses survive. It's a startling statistic. Just 1 in 5 new businesses survive. Further, of those who survive, less than 10% make it to a stage that we call predictable success. Further, of the Fortune 500 firms that were here in 1970, right? 500 of them, of those 500, less than 50 remain, less than 10% from 1970 to today, just 50 years later. Now, in 1970, this is something that affects big firms, not just small firms, but in 1970, the average life expectancy of a Fortune 500 firm was 75 years. Today, they estimate it's 15. Right? Because what's happening is the world around us is changing rapidly, and we as small businesses need to be able to change with it. So, what this does, for me, this brings up 3 critical questions that I think we need to address if we're really going to be serious about succeeding in business today. The first one is, why do so many new ventures fail? Right? And if you're just starting out, this question is absolutely critical to the survival of your business. Now, fortunately, there's actually one clear way to ensure your survival as a small business, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. The second question is this: why is second stage growth so hard? Right? For a while, if you've been successful in business, there's time where it just seems like everything you touch turns to gold, and then one morning you wake up and you realize, hey, something is wrong. We're going to talk about why that happens, why it happens to every single successful business. And finally, why is it so difficult to stay successful? Right? Past success, we know this, past success is no reliable indicator of future success. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further this morning and say past success is actually one of the biggest hindrances to future success, and we'll find out why. Now, what I'd like to do, I'd like to go ahead and jump in. And these are 3 big questions, right? And the reason that I feel like we can answer all 3 of these questions is that they are all part of a pattern that every organization faces. Every single business, every single nonprofit, every governmental unit, in fact, every group of 2 or more people that are going after a shared set of goals, they're going to follow this life cycle. Now, in the life cycle, there's 7 distinct stages, and you can see them displayed here. And of those 7 distinct stages, 4 of them, honestly, they feel bad. I mean, they actually feel awful, and those are indicated by the squiggly lines that you see on the arc. Now, you can also see that there are 3 that feel pretty good. And we're just a couple minutes in here, but what I want to show you is 2 of these actually are good, which means that 1 of them is a lie, and we'll talk about that as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the very first stage is early struggle, right? And if you've started a business, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In early struggle, what we're struggling for, and I want to give you language to this because it's very important, is we're struggling to find a profitable and sustainable market. Right? Early struggle, when you start a business, the one job that you have, the sole thing that you need to do, regardless of the industry you're in or the type of business that you have, your one goal is to find a profitable, sustainable market. Now, in early struggle, the fuel of the business is cash. And if you're in early struggle, you're trying to think, hey, do I have enough cash for next month or maybe even next week or maybe even today, right? Getting through early struggle is all about managing your cash, keeping your expenses low, and finding that profitable market to get your revenue up. I'm wildly generalizing here, but it takes about 2 to 5 years for most businesses to fully get out of early struggle. And during that time, there's actually a very high mortality rate. We talked about this earlier, but 8 in 10 fail. Now, why do they fail? They fail because they fail to keep their eye on the prize. You see, if you're in early struggle today, what you need to do is you need to have an absolutely ruthless focus on finding that profitable and sustainable market. So what we tend to do, especially now when the economy is good, is we like to chase after things that really honestly have nothing to do with our profitable and sustainable market. We get fancy Mac computers or new Aeron chairs or a beautiful office space, and we all celebrate and we have a lot of fun. But the reality of it is none of those things take us a step toward a profitable and sustainable market. They don't. So what you need to do instead, and this is a little silly, I admit, but I'm going to recommend that you do it. If you're in early struggle today, what you need to do is you need to go and get yourself a little bell, a little something that you can place on your desk or in your office, and every time you do something that moves you toward a profitable and sustainable market, I want you to ring the bell, right? Because what it does is it connects us and keeps us focused to what we need to do to get out of early struggle. Now, even before early struggle, there is a person. And it doesn't matter how big the firm is today, if you take GE or if you take Apple or if you take Microsoft, whatever it may be, regardless of the size of the firm today, every firm started with one person. That person was sitting up in the middle of the night, maybe 2 a.m, and they can't sleep. Why? Because they're bothered. And they know in their heart that they have to do something. They know in their heart that they have to start a new business. And so they start tapping away at their keyboard or they start scribbling in a legal pad. And at that moment, that beautiful but quiet and humble moment, a vision is born. And the person who births the vision is the visionary. And I would go so far as to say visionaries are actually a leadership style that we engage in. Now, visionaries in the entrepreneurial space, we have a tendency to sometimes say they're slackers or they started their own business because they didn't have a job. But frankly, that's not true. In fact, most visionaries, before they step into their own business, are making between 125 to 150% of the market wage. That means they're good at what they do. It means that they're being paid well. And so why is it, or what words would we use to describe someone who leaves a very well-paying, stable job to step into a business that maybe they have no business doing because there's an 80% chance of survival? What words would you guys use for that? Crazy, right? Yeah. I would say that they are starters, right? These are risk takers. Visionaries, they almost need a little bit of risk to come alive. They almost need a little bit of risk to help them step forward and to do their very best work. Now, these starters and risk takers, they're also oftentimes good communicators. One definition I like of an entrepreneur is someone who's willing to step out of a job working 40 hours for someone else to step into a job working 80 hours for themselves, right? And that's what our visionaries do. They're full of passion and enthusiasm. They're often charismatic. And so our visionaries, they have a very high squirrel factor. Have you guys ever seen the movie Up? And there's this little dog, if you haven't seen it, his name is Doug, and he's a cute little dog, and he always wants to be part of anything that's going on. But for the life of him, he cannot focus whenever there's a squirrel, right? And our visionaries are like that. They have a high squirrel factor. If you're a visionary in the room, you know what I mean. If you work with a visionary and you're here in this room, you know exactly what I mean. And despite that, one of the things about visionaries is that they're actually thinking very long term. Our visionaries, they have a passion in the moment, but they have a vision for the long term. Now, in a group setting in particular, visionaries are primarily concerned with the question, why? Why is it that we do what we do? Now, if you're in early struggle, one of the only ways that you can get through early struggle, one of the prerequisites is a visionary in the organization. And the reason for that is this. One of the strongest characteristics of a visionary is what I would call resilience, right? If you guys are in early struggle, if you've been through early struggle, you know it's not easy. It is a struggle day in and day out. And our visionaries, they have resilience galore. So my wife and I, we have a son, his name is Liam, and he just has energy out to wazoo. And in a hope to help harness some of that energy, we bought him one of those blow-ups that's bottom weighted. You know what I'm talking about? And you kind of whack it and it falls down and it gets back up. Well, he will punish that thing. And I mean, he'll jump on it, he'll sit on it, he'll punch it. And what do you think it does every single time he lets up? It pops right back up, right? That is a visionary. That's how they can get through early struggle. Now, visionaries aren't the whole picture, though. And most of them, the ones that succeed, they intuitively and innately know that they don't have the full picture. And so what they do is they go out and they find their symbiotic counterpart, and that is an operator. And these operators, they love to get stuff done, right? And they know that ideas are great, they're okay, but getting the idea done is where it actually matters, right? If it's an idea without execution, it's just a dream. But when you get a visionary and an operator together, you turn that dream into reality and something really special happens. Now, these operators, they are ruthless finishers, right? They're not mean people, but if you give them a job to do, they're going to get it done. They'll walk through walls to make it happen. They are action-oriented. They're very literal people. They are doers, right? They're concerned about what needs to get done now. And everything else is business BS, frankly, to an operator. They're very short term. They're thinking about what has to happen today to get us through the end of the day. They love their checklists and punching things out. And in a group setting in particular, they are primarily concerned with the question, what? What needs to get done now? Now, together, the visionary and the operator, they find this rhythm, and it's this beautiful relationship where slowly but surely they start to build up the momentum that they need to get the business out of early struggle. And that's what brings them into the very next phase, which we've given a highly technical name that you'll see here, and that is fun, right? And why do you think it's fun? Anyone? You're making money. It's fun because it's not early struggle anymore, right? In early struggle, the cash is always an issue. We don't know if we can pay the next bill. We don't know if we can meet the next payroll. And it's like that for months and maybe even years. And then all of a sudden, one day, someone walks into the founder's office and says, hey, we can make payroll this week. And the gut reaction was like, oh, no, not a chance. Like, we haven't been able to do that in years. Why would we be able to do it now? Go check the numbers. And they check the numbers, and they come back, and sure enough, there's money there. And then a week or two goes by, and the next payroll's due, and there's still money there. And a few months go by, and finally, the visionary is able to start taking in income as well. It's absolutely incredible. Now, during this time in fun, you can see the organization is growing very quickly. Organizations in fun will often hit double and even triple-digit growth year to year. And why do you think it is they can hit such a high degree of growth? It's because their market share at the beginning of fun is we calculate it as precisely 2% of the square root of squat, right? It's nothing. All they've done at that point is found the profitable and sustainable market. And so what fun is about mining that profitable and sustainable market. Fun is about sell, sell, sell. And if you feel like you've finally broken free of that early struggle and you're stepping into some of those really glorious moments as an entrepreneur where things just seem to work, I want to encourage you, you need to go deep in your sales. You need to go deep in your market. In fun, the business is doing whatever it is that the business is set out to do. In a nonprofit organization like a hospital, it may be heal, heal, heal. But for most of us sitting in this room, fun is about selling. It's about finding all of the low-hanging fruit and enjoying every minute of it. If there's a question question when you're in fun? The answer is yes. I have to warn some of you, some of the people in this room are in fun, and you have to watch out for them because they're so passionate and enthusiastic about what it is that they do that you're going to end up buying whatever it is that they're selling, even if you don't know what it is or need it, because it's just that fun. These organizations, they're highly flexible and responsive. They are highly attuned to what the customer needs. The customer says, hey, we need pink widgets, and all you have is blue. Everyone shows up on Saturday and paints your blue widgets pink to get them there on time, right? It's a lot of fun. Now, during this time is when the myths and the legends of the business are born. And it's during this time that it feels like every week, maybe even every day, you're snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, right? You end every single week righteously exhausted. And somehow it works. And somehow you get the job done on time. Now, what do you think happens for an organization that's growing in the double or triple digits? Do you think that it's getting simpler, or do you think it's getting more complex? More complex, that's right. And it's that growing and increasing complexity that actually causes the organization to step into, inevitably, to step into this troubled time that we call whitewater. Now, in whitewater, what happens is the complexity inside the organization causes us to start causing problems. You see, mistakes and errors start popping up where they just didn't exist before. We may miss a delivery time. We may deliver the wrong color product to a customer. We may completely screw up a job or an installation. And the other place that this shows up is we may hire someone and they don't quite work out, and we chalk it down to, they just weren't a good fit, or they didn't have the hard skills that we needed. And so we hire another, and a month or two later, they don't work out, and again. And eventually, even though at first we kind of go through a denial phase, eventually we realize, hey, there's something systemically wrong in the organization. And because of that, during this time, profitability plummets, right? When you're redoing orders, whenever you're correcting errors on the job, whenever you have staff turnover, it's very difficult to maintain the profitability that you had in fun. During this time, it feels like an absolute loss of control. What's actually happening is you're finding out you were never in control in the first place, right? Now you know it, and you feel it everywhere you look. For many, it's almost existential, and a lot of visionaries and a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to, they actually wonder, hey, is my business dying, right? Now, as you can see from the model here, we're not even halfway yet, but it feels that awful. And the reality of it is they are actually right on the cusp of one of the most unbelievably productive and profitable point in their business. But to do that, there's one thing that they absolutely have to do. There's a loss of alignment and infighting inside the organization. So during fun, everyone's passionate and enthusiastic, and if things go wrong, it doesn't really matter because there's so much momentum that's moving us forward. But as we've hired in all of this staff, and many of them weren't there in the very beginning with us, and many of them, maybe they don't feel like us. And so what tends to happen is the organization starts to fight with itself. What you need to do if your business is in whitewater is you need to start to implement systems and processes organization-wide. Now, if we have a visionary and an operator, and our visionary is they're chasing everything, and then there's a squirrel, and everything is the most important thing until they're onto something else, right? And we have our operator who's like, stop talking to me, we're just getting this job done. How well do you think that they're going to put together systems and processes and stick to them consistently? Not very well, right? They're not going to cross all their T's or dot all their I's or fill in all the forms and perform all the expense reports. And so what they do, they're smart, right? You visionaries and operators are smart, and they realize, hey, we need to bring in someone else who can help us to systematize what we do. We pick that up intuitively. And so what they do, they bring in the third style, which is our processor. Now, processors, they think in terms of systems and processes, right? They eat, sleep, and drink process. Now, these processors, they're sustainers at heart, right? And their primary objective is to say, hey, how can we do this consistently over the long run? They're process-oriented. They're highly risk-averse, and that tends to be a bit of a shock to the organization because all of the success of the organization has come from taking risks, right, and trying new things. And all of a sudden, we have a processor in the leadership mix, and they tend to be more risk-averse, especially than the operator and the visionary. They work slowly, and this can cause a lot of problems, and we'll talk a little bit about why that happens. But the main reason why processors work slowly is because they require a great deal of precision. One way to look at it is, for a visionary, $1 million is everything north of about 600,000, right? But for a processor, $1 million is exactly 1 penny more than $999,999.99, right? They need precision. And one of the brilliant things that processors do when they're in a team and they're doing a great job is they ask the question, how? How do we do what it is that we want to do? And what happens with the processor, they join our visionary and operator. But even though the visionary, when they come in, and you visionaries are going to do this if you haven't already, so just to key into it, but the visionary steps in and says, hey, we need you, and they have this great pitch, we need you to come on board, we need systems and processes. I am 120% behind those systems and processes. But when the visionary says that, who do you think that those systems and processes are for? The visionary? No, they're for everybody else, right? That what they're really saying is, I'm 120% behind you and your systems and processes, except for me. And so the operator, they have a slightly different take on it. The operator, they're great firefighters. If you have an operator on your team, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And they do a fantastic job at it, but it wears them out. And so when the processor finally comes in, there's this honeymoon period where the operator's thinking, hey, I'm not the only one who has to deal with this stuff anymore, right? If the operator is the firefighter, who do you think is lighting all the fires? The visionary, right? They are the arsonist. And that's okay. That's what they do. It's how they add to the team. But the problem is the operator becomes so worn out, and they welcome the processor coming in. But then what do you think happens when the operator gets smart to the fact that the visionary isn't adhering to any of the systems and processes, right? They say, wait a second, this was supposed to help. Now all it's doing is slowing me down, right? That we used to screw up. Sure, I'll give you that. But now we still screw up, and all we do is take time to write it down. What's going on, right? And so the operator actually starts to sour on the processor as well. And what do you think happens when the visionary and operator who've been there many times from the beginning, and there's this sweat equity and this bond between them, and they realize, hey, there's trouble on the leadership team, who do you think is going to get blamed? The processor, right? And typically what ends up happening is that they chalk it up to, hey, it's just a cultural mismatch. They don't get us. If we go down this road, we're going to lose who we are. And so what happens more often than not is the experiment fails. Either the processor leaves because they're so frustrated, or they're relegated to a part of the organization where it doesn't really matter. Or in many cases, they'll be fired. And the visionary and the operator, they come together and they take a step back. And they say, hey, it was fun back here in fun. And so they simplify things a little bit, and it's wonderful again, right? They step into this kind of the glory days all over again, but surely as they got into Whitewater the first time, they step into it again. Because success breeds complexity, and complexity will kill success every single time. And so what we need to do to get out of Whitewater is we have to start implementing systems and processes across the organization. Now, why is this? What's the difference? It's because in predictable success, which we'll get to in a moment, you not only have the ability to grow, you actually have the ability to scale. And there's a lot of definitions for growth and scaling, and I want to make it very simple for you. In fun, when you're growing, what you're doing is you are overcoming complexity, you're overcoming differences, you're delivering consistent quality in the face of simplicity, right? That's what fun is. You're consistently making good on your promises in a very simple environment. Now, once you enter whitewater and to get into predictable success, what you need to do is be able to consistently provide quality in the face of complexity. And that's what it means to scale. To be able to consistently provide quality in the face of complexity. And so after a moment of denial and a couple of failed experiments, the visionary and the operator, they finally realized, hey, something's got to change. We need to add systems and processes if we want this thing to really scale. And they do. And that's what brings them into predictable success. And predictable success is marked by that one thing, the ability to scale. Now, during predictable success, the perception of control that we had in fun is now replaced by real control. And we still maintain much of the flexibility that we had in fun. During that time, there's a tension that balances systems and processes with vision, creativity, and initiative. During that time, you can stay there, in theory, as long as you'd like. It's not like human aging where, each one of us is getting older day by day and we don't get to go back. In fact, in businesses, you could stay in predictable success indefinitely. And that's because the right tension is holding everything together. Now, what typically happens, and a lot of us, if we get into predictable success, what we want to do, we want to kind of stay right in the middle of predictable success where everything's working perfectly. But that's not the way that it works. Instead, most of the time what happens is the organization will tend to oscillate between a little bit of treadmill, which is the next step that we're talking about here, and a little bit of whitewater. It's where it's not always what the visionary wants, it's not always what the operator wants, and it's not always what the processor wants, but all three styles are co-equal in the decision-making process in the organization. Now, what do you think happens if systems and processes were what got us out of whitewater, right? And whitewater is a tremendously painful and difficult time. We're gonna start to like systems and processes, right? And when you like something because it helped you and it got you out of a difficult time, what do you tend to do? You tend to do more of that, right? And slowly but surely, the organization will step into treadmill. And treadmill is a place where, for the first time in the organization's history, we're actually over-processed. And what tends to happen is that form starts to edge out function. You see, face time starts to edge out actually delivering, right? Filling out checklists becomes more important than the thing that the checklist was actually there for in the first place. And it's during this time that there's a subtle loss of visionary risk-taking. And what also happens, we talk a lot about innovation in businesses that are in treadmill. We talk a lot about initiative and risk-taking. But honestly, they decline. They're actually discouraged in an organization quietly. No one really says this, but they're discouraged unless it's for incremental gains. We lose the ability to take risk slowly but surely. Now, in treadmill, there is good news. When you recognize we're in treadmill, you actually have the opportunity to get back. And so what typically happens is the visionary, they say, hey, enough is enough. We do not need a customer to fill out 52 pieces of information just to do business with us, right? This is crazy. And they pull the organization back into predictable success. However, if you don't catch it, if the organization doesn't slow its processes and systematization down, it falls into the second to last phase, which is the big rut. And in the big rut, the organization has lost its ability to self-diagnose. You've lost your ability to recognize something is wrong. We talked about one of the smooth areas being a lie. The lie is the big rut. And it's a very difficult lie to recognize because what happens is the organization will tend to have some of its most profitable years in the big rut. And why is that? It's because they've stopped failing, right? They've stopped trying new things. They're playing it safe. Organizations during this time, it looks like it's this, precipitous decline, but in fact, what tends to happen is it's a long, slow slide into irrelevancy. And it's because what we've done is we've stayed inside of our comfort zone. During this time, the organization can become highly bureaucratic. And once you're in the big rut, it's no longer a matter of if the business is going to end, it's a matter of when. And slowly but surely, the business ends up in the final stage, which is the death rattle, where it's either broken up or sold off or just simply ceases to exist. Now, there's one more style that we need to talk about, because what happens when you have a visionary and an operator and a processor together, right? The visionary, they're working about 7 times as fast as an operator, right? There's about 7 ideas that they vocalize. There's about 70 ideas they don't vocalize, let's be honest. But there's about 7 ideas that they vocalize for every 1 idea that the operator can execute on. And for every one idea that a processor can execute on, the operator can do about 7, right? So our processors are moving at about 50 times less the speed of a visionary. During this time, if we leave each of our types, each of our styles to their own devices, the team cannot sustain predictable success for the long haul. And so what the best performing teams, what top performing teams do is they add a 4th style. And that 4th style is the synergist. Now, the synergist holds the team together, right? Now, synergists, they are enterprise-focused people. Jack Welch is actually a great example, for those of you who have followed his career, of all 4 types. Jack Welch started off early in his career as an engineer. He was a processor at heart. And as he moved into management, he started to become more and more of an operator. And that's when he got the nickname Neutron Jack, right? He would cut a facility if it wasn't on time. And as he rose through the ranks and became CEO of GE, he really started to flex his visionary muscle. And about 5 years before he decided he was going to retire, he said, the number one thing I need to do over the next 5 years is to find my successor. That's a classic synergist. Their enterprise focus, their focus on people, right? They have an exceptionally high EQ. Now, one other thing about synergists is many of them are not actually born. Much like Jack Welch, many of them are learned styles. And that's exceptionally important, because what it means in most businesses, it's not going outside and hiring a synergist in. What it is for most businesses, if you want your team to excel and to stay in predictable success for the long term, if you want your visionary operator and processor to not only be able to work together, but to be able to leverage each other's strengths, you have to have each of you develop your synergist style. They are medium and long-term thinkers, and it goes without saying, but they are primarily concerned with a question, who, right? Who needs to do what? One of the things that our synergists do very well, and one of the things that each of you can learn and take from this, is something that we call the enterprise commitment. And the enterprise commitment is this. It says, when working in a team or group environment, I will place the interest of the enterprise ahead of my own. Again, if working in a team environment, I will place the interests of the enterprise ahead of my own. That means if I'm a visionary, I'm not only ever going to bring visionary traits, right? It's not that if you're a hammer, right, everything you see is a nail, but you can't build a whole house with a hammer. And so the enterprise commitment is saying, hey, I have my strengths, I have my strong suits, but I'm going to adapt the way that I show up for the best of the enterprise. Now, if you're sitting here today saying, hey, this is cool, and I kind of think I'm a visionary and operator, I actually have a styles quiz for you where you can find out precisely what that is. You can actually share this with your team. So if you have your phone, you can take a picture here, and the URL will pop up for you. If you'd like to just type in the URL, you can do that as well. I would strongly encourage you, the quiz is absolutely free. Share it with your team. And I want to give you a little pro tip this morning. If you have a team together and you're trying to get your organization into predictable success, if you were to take all 4 scores of each of the team members, you would want to average those out. And if your average for visionary, operator, processor, and synergist is 240, that would be ideal. So 240 for your team as all together in each category is ideal. The second quiz that I have for you here is also free, and it is the Lifecycle stage. So maybe you've been hearing me and you say, hey, yeah, we've been through early struggle, but I can't quite tell if we're in whitewater or if we're in treadmill. Or, hey, things feel pretty good right now, but I'm not quite sure if we're in predictable success or if we're in fun. Well, we have a quiz that will help you do exactly that. It'll help you to find out what stage you're in, and it'll give you the information that you need to make the most of that stage. Now, the final bit that I have for you here, and what I want you to get from this is, there are 7 different stages that an organization goes through. And for each one of them, the recipe for growth is different, right? If you're in early struggle, systems and processes are a problem, right? If you're in early struggle, it's all about finding a profitable, sustainable market. If you're in fun, the goal is to sell. Sell, sell, sell. You have found your market. Stay in that market for as long as you can and get all the low-hanging fruit. Finally, if you're in whitewater, you have to implement systems and processes. You cannot get to predictable success any other way. If you're in treadmill, you need to rein in those systems and processes. You need to reinvent the entrepreneurial spark that you had. You need to build it into the entire organization. If you're in the big rut, then I hope that that's the business that you're not representing today, and that you've recognized that and you're starting your own business here this morning. And again, the final stage for businesses is death rattle. So I hope this was helpful for you guys this morning. For many of you, I would suspect that you're either in early struggle or in fun on the left side of that. And I want to tell you, it's actually a wonderful place. So enjoy each of the moments. I hope this helps you to know, hey, this is what we need to do to excel. And I think that with the right knowledge and information, with the training that you're going to get from my colleagues here today, I think we're going to help you do exactly that. Thanks so much.